Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another episode. On today's show, I'm thrilled to be joined by Iztok Franko of Diggin' Basketball, one of the smartest people covering the NBA and the Lakers and Luka. I am a subscriber to Diggin' Basketball. I read his post-game analysis, his pre-game analysis, and it is top-notch. Cannot recommend it enough. Iztok, how are you doing tonight?
Good. Thanks for having me, and thanks for reading.
Yeah,
Thanks
of
for
course,
the shout
man.
out. It's been
High level.
fun.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I said, like you said, I try to kind of chronicle the season, which to me the grind is the fun. So sometimes the changes happen slow, but I think the process of an 82 game season, once you document it, I think to me it's the fun part of an NBA
And
season.
I really enjoy your five takeaways after each game, and I think you do a nice job of. They're like relatively short, but they're very dense with like you are efficient. You're maximizing each word in each paragraph that you're using. So I recommend it for anybody who has not yet subscribed. But I wanted to have you on because you chronicle the team, and I think you have such great insights. I wanted to ask you about this Spurs loss and just right now, like the state of the team. The sky's falling for a lot of Laker fans, and understandably so. After another double-digit blowout loss, they have lost all 7 games this season by double figures. They have lost several of those games in convincing fashion to young, fast, athletic teams that have been able to get downhill at will against them and create shots at the rim or kick out opportunities for shooters, then also defensively can pressure them and either blitz them and have the speed to rotate and kind of wreak some havoc, or as we've seen with the Suns and the Spurs, have the defensive discipline and defensive execution to keep the Luka Ayton, Austin Ayton two-man game into just a 2v2 and force those guys into a lot of isolation, a lot of contested mid-range jumpers. So looking at the Spurs loss, LA lost 132 to 119, dropped them from second to fourth in the West. But how concerning to you was the Spurs loss, and what was your big picture takeaway from that loss and sort of just the way that they've lost some of these recent games?
I mean, it was an interesting game because, like you said, it's the same loss all over again. So I think it's a microcosm of the season so far, and it showed, I think, what this team. It's really not that hard to read at the moment. They are what they are, and they're, in my opinion, team of extremes. So on one side, I think they do a lot of things extremely well, and maybe in times like now, after losses, is a little bit more blurry to see them, but I think they're still a top 3 team in half-court offense. They're still the best shooting team at the rim. They're still the best shooting team in mid-range. They have the best scorer per game, the best scoring duo, and the best scorer in the NBA. They get to the line the most. So there is a extreme part of this specific part of NBA game, which is very important, but is not the only part of the game as we are seeing now. And especially in the regular season games where teams and games happen fast and you have to turn around fast. The other parts, like playing hard all the time, run in transition, like JJ said, win on the margins. This is equally important, or is becoming in the new modern fast-paced game even more important. And this is where the Lakers struggle, and this is where they struggled in the Spurs loss. Like you said, they got killed in transition. They don't score in transition. They struggle to contain the drive. So defensively, we know starting 5 has obvious flaws. So I think how concerning is this loss? I think it's more like a mirror, setting a mirror to what this team it is at the moment. And
I think
there will be similarly frustrating losses. I think what was to me more frustrating in this loss, to be honest, is that it was the big stage, it was the extra motivation, it was the extra free time to prepare, and to just roll over like that. This is something that I didn't like. But again, it shows that this team, if the good parts that I said before, the best shooting, the best at the rim, the best mid-range free throw rate, if some of this doesn't go well in that game, they don't have a backup plan, really. Because especially now, I think also when they are trying to integrate LeBron back, there is some, I think, integration period here. It used to be turnovers that kill them. Now it's every shot that they miss. It's basically, it's almost like counts double, because you're giving up points at the other end. And this is, I think, what is the problem at the moment.
That was one of the things that stood out from that game too, was that they didn't have many turnovers. They took care of the ball, but every turnover was basically a pick six, right? Like Austin gets picked twice at half court, and I think LeBron ends up chasing down and blocking one of them and saving that possession. But like they had several times where it was I think they only had 11 turnovers, but it felt like at least 8 or 9 of those turnovers led directly to San Antonio transition opportunities. And that's where, like you do want to take care of the ball, right? But you also want to, you're going to inevitably make some mistakes over the course of a game, but you want to limit them getting out in transition at such a high frequency, and also just having these like 3-on-1, 4-on-1 opportunities where, I think about the Harrison Barnes dunk, where just no one picks him up off the ball, late in the second quarter. And like, especially against the Suns, that was one where it really stood out in terms of that turned into a track meet, and the Lakers just didn't have the athletes for that. So I think that's like another wrinkle for them, is even when they do when they don't take care of the ball, it's doubly problematic, because if they had 20 turnovers in that game, all of a sudden that they're losing by 30. But even when they do take care of the ball, it still means they have to get back in transition, because that's where they can sometimes be fickle with that.
Yeah, and they're just a bad transition team currently on both sides, not only defense. It's also offense.
Has been actually a little bit more concerning, because they should be better on that end, right?
Yeah, and they try with some seals. They try running at the rim, trying to fit, but also I think at some times in the past they tried even too hard, like force feeding some quick lobs, quick heads, and that's when some of the transitions came from. But now I think they limited that. But also I think what is similar in this Spurs and Suns losses, I think people and JJ talked about the scheme when people try to defend Luka or Austin 2-on-2, basically like a mix of a drop coverage, try to make them score. And in games like this, when they do score, but maybe not score at the extremely high level or at high rate, I think, again, issues get compounded, because the threes they take are typically the step back threes from about the break. So it's either Luka or Austin running back or not running back. And they are basically in this game you saw, basically it was like Luka trying to contain Castle, or Austin trying to contain Castle, which is too athletic, and Rui, I don't know, or somebody else is in the corner and he doesn't have the speed or athleticism to come up and challenge the shot. The only one that did it was LeBron on 2 occasions, which was basically a great sign of him getting some of this athleticism back. But I think above the break threes, again, are problematic when they're not going in. So I think this is, like I said, until they change, and we will talk about that, maybe roster-wise or rotation-wise, I think with this starting 5, it's going to be a lot of live and die by shots going in. Yeah.
Taking a step back and looking at just the start of the season, the Lakers are 17-7, number 4 in the West, 7th in offense, 21st in defense. What have you made of the start to the season? And again, with some of these flaws, you mentioned like a mirror. Like I think if we're looking at them in the mirror, to your point earlier, like they have been a really good team to start the season. I just did my contender rankings last night. I had them 5th still in contender rankings. Unfortunately for them, 3 of the teams I had in front of them were in the West, and that's just the unfortunate nature of they could be a top 4 or 5 team in the league, and it's just the 3 best teams I think right now in the NBA are OKC, Denver, and Houston. But what have you thought about their start overall? And it does feel like, despite the recent skid, like things have gone, especially factoring in the injuries that they've had, and LeBron missing the first 14 games, Luka's missed multiple games, Austin's missed multiple games, Smart has obviously been out over a lot of the recent stretch. Like despite all of that, they've had a pretty good start to the season, and I don't think we should lose sight of that. So what have you made overall of the first 24 games?
Yeah, I think having the record that they have 17-7, I think it's in a way surprising for most people, and it's nothing to complain about. I think if realistically somebody would ask us before the season start, would we take this 17-7? I think most of the people would. But I think what's good about this start is they reacted well. They won a lot of close games. They won 2 games on game winners. I think I wrote this in the off season when they made the moves, when they got Smart and when they got Ayton. I think I wrote about that time that moves, because everybody knew they have some holes to fill, like the center was the biggest one. I wrote that these moves bought them some time, and I think it's the same with this start, with the 17-7 start, bought them some time to not be in panic mode from the start of the season, to not have all this pressure, all these extra questions that we are having now after losses only, basically. But I think with this additional, or this time, or let's say a little bit more peace that they have, hopefully they can use it and think about what is really the goal this season. Is this a transition year? Is this something that we're trying to figure out, that we will be frustrated by the losses, but can this roster even be tweaked on the fly to get to these top contenders that you mentioned? Or is there a move, or do they believe we can make 1 or 2 tweaks and we can close this gap? So I think they have more time to do this from now until the trade deadline. So it's going to be interesting how they really view it internally. How close do they think they are? Because the reality is, and everybody's talking about the net rating, about these losses, the record is a little bit better than the team currently is, and this is what we see in all the losses.
Agreed. I have no notes on that. Let's get into the adjustments and changes. So what would you do in the short term? I think longer term, we're going to get into the trades and what the Lakers need specifically in terms of player archetypes, how many players they might need to add into the rotation. But in terms of short term we're recording this on Friday, December 12th. Let's say like over the next month or so into that mid-January, when a guy like Herb Jones can't even be traded until January 15th. So if we're looking at like the next month as the runway for the Lakers to fully evaluate this group, fully evaluate what they need on both sides of the ball and what the rotation should be, the lineups, etc., what would you do in the short term? Would you change the starting group? I think that's kind of the low-hanging fruit here of potentially Marcus Smart in for Rui Hachimura. Would you change the rotation? Would you try to go a little bit more athletic, a little bit more defensive-minded? How would you approach? Would you change the scheme with some of the switching and being a little bit more conservative, or at least fight? Like, I think they have a really bad habit of not fighting over screens and very passively switching, where you see other teams.
And this goes back to the starting 5, like you said.
Yeah.
I think if you look at to fight over screens, you have to have a lean body, you have to be fast, you have to be agile, and none of the Luka, Rui, LeBron has the body for that. It's just basically physical. Your physical attributes. So it's not that I don't think you can even see they would start most games first half. They wouldn't fight over screens. They wouldn't JJ call it like be physical on screens, like pushing guys off screens and things like that. And then in second half they would make an adjustment and they would start to be more physical. And you would see, I don't know, Rui or Luka try fight over screen, but they're not really. It's not what they are suited for. So that's why they revert back to switching. But going back to your question, what can they do? And the starting 5, I think the tricky situation, because everybody say, yeah, let's insert Marcus Smart, and I think obviously he would adjust some of the flaws. I think there are a couple of problems here. First, I don't think they want to rely too much on Marcus because of his body and the way he plays. And then when he goes in another stretch, which will happen, like these 6-7 games that he will miss, then you go back again and you're adjusting the starting five. And then the other part, I think, is the whole contract situation. Rui is in a contract year. Austin is playing for a new contract. Smart, Ayton, all these guys are basically in last year, or let's say in key year of their contracts, which I think makes this locker room dynamic and these changes a little bit more tricky. Now, that being said, I think it's obvious is that the starting five, all five players, none is like a really high motor, high hustle, high energy guy. They are all what I call finesse, often skilled players. So I think readjusting some of this balance in the starting five and in the rotation, this is something that I think they could try. I think it was interesting after last loss that JJ was talking about. We don't win on the margins. We don't crash. We don't turnover. We don't create turnovers. So I think if they want to do that, then he needs to play what he used to call last year the benchy units more. So, and this is where it comes, okay, should I play Jake more? Should I play Wando more? Maybe in small ball lineups that could be more aggressive, that could pressure more. Should I play Smart more? And then some of the guys that he's relying on now, like Rui, Ayton, they are all averaging 30 minutes per game, which I think if you cut a little bit into those minutes, into 25, then you give some to more high effort, high skilled players. This is something that is the alternative. But we'll see. I think so. As for now, all the moves they did, even when we were second guessing who will be the second starter at the beginning of the year, it was Gabe, which to me, at least at the beginning of the year, tells that they are leaning more into this all offense, let's say shooting and spacing and things. So we'll see. I think the only way to do is also play Adou more, probably. They need to risk. I think there are guys like... that I think there are guys that you need to take some risk on, because if you really want to change drastically how they look on the floor.
I agree. And I think looking at the data, there's a lot of different ways to like, we could just go straight on court net rating. You could go on off differential. But I think one of the most telling things for me is looking at when Rui's on the floor, Lakers have a 117.7 offensive rating. When Marcus is on the floor, they have a 116.4 offensive rating. So a little bit of a difference there, right? Like, and that's been the primary argument for starting Rui has been the spacing, the shooting. He is one of the best shooters in the NBA, bar none. Like that is an elite skill of his. It is valuable to have that as a catch and shoot weapon. And we're seeing, Luka getting downhill and throwing the corner skip to Rui, especially in that, the Philly game. Toronto, Luka didn't play, but Austin was hitting him, and like that is a real weapon. But there's not much of a difference when those two are on the floor offensively. When you look at the defensive side, Rui on the floor, 116.6 defensive rating, Marcus Smart 107.8. So that's where you have about a 9 points per 100 possession difference there between the two. And like that's the thing that I keep coming back to is Marcus is not going to hit 8 threes every night like he did against the Spurs. And there was a reason why they were guarding, like they were putting centers on him, ignoring him. Okay. That's something that teams will test him with. But I don't think the offensive difference has not been, it's big in terms of like stats. If you just look at their raw points per game, but in terms of actual impact on the team, there's not been much of a difference offensively, but there's a huge difference defensively. And to your point, like there's probably not, I don't think there's a perfect option here, right? Like Marcus, there are real concerns with the shooting and the health and the availability. And you might have a situation where if you do commit to Marcus, you are now having to swap, like he plays 4 games, then he rests on a back-to-back, and now you got to start Rui or you got to start Jake or Gabe or whoever. And like you kind of have a rotating starting group. My only pushback to that is like the status quo is not working. The Lakers, it is just under 80 minutes, but the starting group is a minus 13.1 together. And the Ayton Rui combination has not been good together this season. They've been getting lit up defensively. And I just think, I don't know how much more of a sample size we need until it starts to be, even if that group was like a -5, right? Or like it starts to stabilize and they're -3. I'm like, if you want to be a contender, your starting group should not be a minus. Like that is a non-negotiable. That is a non-starter. So if this team really wants to win a championship and go on a deep playoff run, I don't think they can continue starting this group. Now, again, some of the alternatives are problematic as well, but I would at least rather explore alternatives and other options than keep, like, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. They're starting a lineup that just does not work. It just does not work.
Also, no, that's agree. But also in game to game, was it the first Phoenix game when Rui, I think, had one shot or something like that? I think that was something. And I think in games like we are discussing, like the Spurs or the Phoenix game, when the teams defend Luka and Austin a certain way, when they force them into scoring, I think these are the games when I would put rather a Jake in the corner or even Vando or Smart in the corner and play him 30 minutes because they're not getting those shots anyway. So, and I think on the floor, they would help you much more, or even Adou, like we said. So I agree with you. I told you, I think, I don't know, for Lakers fans, but my readers who followed Mavericks, we had the same discussion like 3-4 years ago, because Rui, and I wrote this in my 20 game check, is basically the Mavericks equivalent of the Tim Hardaway Jr. Tim Hardaway Jr. was the same player who was a long time starter with the Mavericks. He was like a shooter, somebody who would punish opposing team for collapsing on Luka, but he was basically a guy who didn't do anything else. He's not like a defender. He was lost a lot of time on defense. And it was always with Jason Kidd, what should we do? Should we bench Tim Hardaway Jr.? And then it was always a difficult decision because it was so much, okay, we have only offense. Then eventually they got a better defensive players, and the difference in the starting lineup in the athleticism was so huge that nobody was even questioning why we were waiting for this so long. Here, I think it's a little bit more challenging situation with the Lakers because, like you said, these alternatives are a little bit more complicated. But I agree with you with the starting lineup. I think the energy that or the aggressiveness that they start the games, but not only games, even halves of a lot of the time, the second half is the same story. I think if they just open the game better, I think also watching Luka through these years, I think he gets hyped up, and other people when they start making defensive plays, when they start the game well, I think it's the energy boost, and then everybody also translates to the other end. So in this way, I think a lot of time this starting five, because of their composition, they start the game in this fill out mode. We will start if the shots go in, we will start maybe not full throttle on defense, and then it's like an avalanche, and then you don't know, and you're down 10 points, the opponent gets like 3 dunks, and then Stephon Castle is hitting a step back threes, which is basically not his trait. Or Keldon Johnson, because he got a putback, because he got a cut and a dunk, he's making threes now. So this, I think it's a lot of time because they start slow, they give the other team confidence, and we know that the NBA and basketball in general, a lot of things is about confidence. So for sure, I think they need to change something, how they start and open the games.
Agreed. So you mentioned Adou, and that has been a popular solution for a lot of the fan base right now, either playing Adou more or playing Jarred Vanderbilt. I have joked that Jarred Vanderbilt is in a double-decker doghouse where he's played. He had 8 straight DNP CDs. Was not even playing in garbage time when they would empty the bench. Then got the 4-minute shift against Philly. First possession, Philly disrespectfully ignores him. 2 guys think about rotating over, and then they see it's Vando. They look away. They're like, he's gonna miss it. He misses the open 3. And I thought he had a decent shift. Like there was a couple of nice possessions there for him. Had a near offensive rebound that it was like caroming out of bounds. He tried to save it, and like that type of hustle and grit is something that the Lakers don't always have on a nightly basis. So I like that, and some of the defensive stuff he did on a couple of possessions, but it was not like the most promising or encouraging shift from him. And I think it was a little bit of an olive branch from the coaching staff to give him an opportunity to like earn back some trust or a little bit of a role. And I don't think he really did that. But it's undeniable that right now, like they are at a clear deficit in speed and athleticism and defense. So, like, would you incorporate one of those two or both? It sounded like you were implying Adou. And who would you, I guess, tweak the minutes of? Would you, like, I mean, I would say Gabe, but I just don't, like, Gabe has a certain role and a certain amount of trust with the coaching staff. But it seems like Gabe or Jake are the two guys that one of those two could maybe have their minutes reduced a little bit to make way for Thiero or Vando. But what are your thoughts on that? And then also, like, I think the part that people have to remember is, like, there is an offensive side to this, right? Like, we can talk about them getting back in transition and rebounding and point of attack or wing defense, but these are two guys that defenses are going to ignore. They are going to put their center on. They're going to play off of. And there are some real offensive concerns with playing these two guys because they both are very offensively limited.
Yeah, I think it goes, especially with the duo, it goes a little bit back to how they really see this season, because if I think they started the season or they still play now like in a way that, okay, we are a contender, we want to win, we will play the Wets, and let's see how far this takes us. But if you see this more, like I said, as a realistically, that this team is probably not gonna go beyond the second round in the playoffs as currently constructed, then you have to invest in a guy like Adou, because I think what Lakers will need, and this for me, like I said before, that they bought some time in the off season or and now, but I think now it's time to find like one clear piece that will be a future, let's say, starting piece. I don't know if that is Adou, but if you don't try, if you don't invest in development, we will never know, or development will come slower, or they have to find it via trade, because it's obvious that they are lacking something, especially in the starting five. And when we are talking Herb Jones or any other transaction, they need to find a guy who will fit for next 2-3 years next to Luka and Austin. Right now, or looking back to the last offseason, they didn't have any. They didn't bring any guy like that. So they will need, I think now it's going to be time to start addressing that. So from that regard, I would say I would invest, or I would try Adou. Doesn't mean that he has to play 25 minutes all of a sudden or even start. But I think investing in him is investing in the future. And I don't think, like you said, cutting on some of the Gabe minutes, I would, as I said before, I don't think if the effort is the problem, if the defense is the problem, I don't think playing Ayton, playing Rui 30 minutes per game is the right approach, because if you want them to play harder, I think you can't. One thing that you can do is reduce the minutes, reduce the stints. So I think if you cut each of those guys minute by 3-4, you get additional minutes that you can put. I don't know, with Vando, sometimes depends on opposition. You can see maybe you play him instead of Jackson, or if Ayton doesn't have it, like energy level, you try like a small boy 5, something like that. I think to me it's more like a mindset. It's more like a JJ thing, because JJ was a lot of time he's talking that NBA is an effort league. So if he wants to Lakers to be the effort team, he needs to play the effort guys. And I think this is sending the message across. Maybe the results won't be as good in terms of wins like they were now. But I think long term, they will be maybe more competitive and provide more fight in their losses. And going forward, maybe they find a guy, like I said, a guy like Adou or something like that. And also, I think it's investing in the future in terms of when we get Herb Jones. Now I'm hypothetically talking. It's not going to be, I think Herb Jones is going to be, even with Market Smart, people will treat guys same as they treat Marcus Smart, even if they are, 35% shooters, they will leave them open. So it's going to be the same thing. And I think Lakers, they shouldn't be worried to play around that. For example, Dallas played with that with Derrick Jones, who was perceived as a bad shooter all the time. And he was basically a 42, 43 career shooter, but he was left open and he started making shots. It didn't cost them until the finals, which is like a very high mark against a great Celtic team. So I think they need to. What happened with for example, with a guy, an athlete like Derrick Jones Jr., and this is, I think, where a do comparison comes in. You get an easy bucket in transition because the guy runs out. We say Luka is always looking up. He loves guys who can run, who can find lob, even not just a kick ahead, but like a semi-transition opportunities, things like that. So I think it's investing in the future and investing in a style of play or a players, even if Adou Thiero or Vando or I don't know, Jake to a lesser extent isn't the right long-term solution, is maybe testing the archetype and getting the reps, how you can play with them. Because we see current style of play, we see what kind of limitation it has. And also it's frustrating to watch when it doesn't work, And I think they can always revert to these lineups when they say, okay, we want to go all offense. I think they had like 25 games of sample. So I don't think if they change course a little bit, not drastically, but a little bit, this is still the way that they can always return.
And even to that point, Jake and Gabe are not giving you that much offensively or not giving you consistent offense. I think, of course, there's the gravity element. There is the respecting them as shooters compared to Vando and Adou. There's also the ball handling component of them as second side connectors, or if you need one of them to run a quick pick and roll on the second side or dribble handoff or something, like I have more confidence in their I would say basketball IQ and just sort of reading the game, that they are at a different level offensively compared to the other two. But in terms of actual raw output of how many times are we talking about the Lakers bench getting killed by the opposing bench? And ideally, I think those two guys would just have a little bit more consistent output in terms of, again, nothing crazy, but more outings of 6, 8, 9, 10 points off the bench. And that's a pretty low bar, but how many games do they have 0 points or 2 points or 4 points? And it's just those guys, the argument for playing them over those other guys is in part offense based and gravity based and their shooting. But if they're not really giving you that, then that kind of goes away. So I'm with you. I think Adou's the guy for me that we've seen a little bit of the cutting, the stampede cuts, the offensive rebounding. He does play with this, he's kind of like a puppy out there, just sort of excited and playing with this energy that I think the Lakers desperately need. And to your point about just kind of developing him, I just looked this up kind of earlier in the season. From game 3 to game 13, Dalton Knecht was playing 20 minutes a night. And part of that was due to injury, no LeBron and different guys were in and out. But Dalton's performance was not really justifying 20 minutes a night. It was sort of we're trying to see if Dalton can be a more reliable rotation guy. And he did have a few nice games over that span, or, a few solid games, but they were trying to develop Dalton and see if he could pop as one of the back end rotation guys.
To your
and they
point,
tried to kind of do a little bit on the road trip, but I'd like to see more of that.
To your point, they survived those Dalton minutes. So even if he was put there for offense and he didn't really deliver great offense, so I think, okay, maybe it will cost you a win here and there, but I think especially with a guy like Adou, the upside is so much bigger, because if you get him like a potential rotation player or a potential guy who you can then play, let's say, closer to 20 minutes per game, I think that's a huge win for the Lakers, because it changes so much for them.
Looking longer term, so shorter term, we talked about potentially changing the starting group, and there's different ways they could go about that. I still think Smart probably makes the most sense, because Jake or Gabe, I just think are lesser players making a lesser impact, and I don't see Vando or Adou jumping from being out of the rotation to starting. I think that's wishful thinking there. But in terms of the trade front and looking at, let's say again, they kind of evaluate things over the next month, see how they fare. They have a little bit of an easier stretch coming up, and then it starts to ramp up a bit to close the year. They got Houston and Detroit. As they evaluate here over the next month, what do you think the Lakers need potentially on the trade market? Is it just the fifth starter? If the market isn't there, and let's say Herb Jones is not available and Andrew Wiggins and Dillon Brooks are not available because those teams are in the playoff hunt and their teams don't want to just sell them off. if like some of the top perceived targets to be available are not actually available, and it is like the next level of a Keon Ellis, a Sadiq Bey, an Ayo DeSumo, would you still try to get that type of player, even if it is more of like a bench role piece that is a guy that's playing 18, 20, 22 minutes a night, maybe 25 minutes a night off the bench? Is it multiple guys? Is it maybe like a by committee thing of you try to go get a couple of those guys and see, if you could patch something together and sort of, again, kind of do it by maybe reshuffling the bench a bit? Or like, how are you approaching the deadline if you're the Lakers based on what we've seen up to this point and what the glaring needs are, frankly?
I think, first of all, I think it's extremely hard to reshuffle or rebuild a team around two so specific players as is Luka and the 41-year-old to be LeBron James. I think that's almost an impossible task, to be honest. So that's why I say, in my opinion, if there is a move, and they have limited resources in terms of one pick and expiring, but I think you can be creative. If you look back, history, the best teams, the Celtics, for example, I think they got both Derrick White, they got for a similar package. So if there is a move for a player like that, who, as I said before, if there is a move for a player who can be a future fit next to Luka, next to Austin, if they see him as a long-term fit, I think you do that move, because I think it is important, because even as frustrating as that might be for, I don't know, for the fans, for us to see, or even to look at this as in prime Luka year as a gap transition year, but I think the reps, I think this is the team that will get to the playoffs. So if you get this one starter, one piece, you get one run in the playoffs, you get one run in the postseason. I think these reps are still very important for the future. So if there is this one move, I would certainly try to make them. What is this? What kind of a player archetype? I think it's either a wing defender, or it's a four. I would say an athletic four that can make plays, which are hard to find. But this is something that I would look much rather than, I don't know, try to get like 3 bench pieces and would say, or 2 rotation pieces, because I don't think they would move the needle that much. We also see that JJ, when the going gets tough, he shrinks the rotation and relies on his core guys. So I think these minutes then get squeezed even more. So I would rather might have one clear piece that I say, okay, this is a starter, and this guy is gonna be a starter for next, I don't know, 1-2 seasons. So that's something that I would look at and just see how much it changes the dynamics of the starting five, the dynamics of the team. But like I said, I think to rebuild completely or say, okay, we will go from this to contender on an OKC level with what they currently have to play with in this time of the season, I think it's going to be extremely hard.
How would you rank Herb Jones, Andrew Wiggins, Dillon Brooks, and Derrick Jones Jr., those 4 guys as potential? And I guess we can factor in cost here. I assume Derrick Jones would have the lowest cost of the 4, especially coming off this injury, but it's also the Clippers. So I mean, you can make a case that none of those guys are available, or the Clippers aren't going to want to trade with the Lakers. Pelicans seem to not want to trade with the Lakers, at least based on the recent report. I mean, Suns, like Heat. I mean, they had the talks over the summer. So I don't know how realistic any of these guys are in general, but specifically for the Lakers. But let's just say those are like the 4 best wing starter level guys. Like, how would you rank those 4?
I mean, definitely, I think Herb Jones, and I even watch him a little bit more, not only the 2 games, Pelicans against the Lakers, but some others. I think he is a guy whose defensive playmaking and his length, and I think he's the guy who, I think, from all these guys, he was all defense kind of a type of a player. I think so. I think definitely I like him the most as and I think he's also on a look at Austin timeline in terms of age. So I think he's a guy who say, okay, you can think this is the guy. It's one of the starting 5 building blocks going forward. Because I like Wiggins defensively, but he's obviously a little bit older, and it's probably the decline will start athletic at some point. Dillon Brooks, I think in terms of, we see him what he did in terms of culture when we are talking about this hustle always. I think it's a similar effect that when you see when Marcus Smart plays. I think it's not in terms of Marcus Smart on the court with the Lakers, it's not only what he does individually, but we've seen Luka, for example, he was talking, I want to learn to play defense with Marcus Smart. I was joking how many charges, counting on Twitter, career high already he has in charges. But I think that's the fact, because it's a little bit contagious. So I think people, especially a guy like Luka, who I think needs a little bit, sometimes he's an emotional player. So I think when he see on defense other players doing like highlight plays, I think he gets hyped up for other players doing like getting blocks. And this is what we saw in Dallas. I think when we got a guy like PJ Washington, who was like standing on business, getting into guys' face. I think it's a guy that I think Luka is like, loves guys like that, because I think it's also hypes him up. So I think Dillon Brooks is a guy, but he has some similar traits like Marcus Smart. When on the other end, it's sometimes this irrational confidence will result in a shot that, I don't know, somebody or sometimes we won't like. But I think for sure, I think having a guy like that, like or even together with Marcus, I think it would be awesome to watch on this team. Then Derrick Jones Jr., I watched him very closely 2 years. I think he is a guy who you can put, especially why he fits this team well, because I think he defends down well, because he's agile, he can go over screens, he has good length, he can contest, but he has problem with a little bit more bulky guys. And these are the guys that, I don't know, theoretically Luka, LeBron, Rui can defend better. So I think this is something, and also he's one of the fastest guys. So if you see lobs in transition, leaking ahead, even baseline cuts and lobs, I don't know how many times you see this season when Luka was trying to, Rui is cutting baseline, Luka tries a lob, and it's basically, you just see that the play is there, but the athleticism is not to finish that play. So this is some of the things that, for example, a guy like Derrick Jones Jr. Helps you. So I think he would be, in this case, if it doesn't cost you, I don't know, if it doesn't cost you a first round pick, I would go back and say, okay, this is a guy I would take on, because I think he would change a lot. And if he doesn't cost you a lot of resources, even if you play him off the bench, I think he can provide a lot of stuff that you currently miss.
Yeah, I think I if we're factoring it cost, I still think Herb is just the best longer term fit, and I think is it like in the conversation for ideal guy you'd want to put next to Luka longer term, right? Regardless of what happens with Austin, like I think Herb is like, that is the 2-3 that you put there. That's like the defensive guy. The shooting is up and down. He does have a bit of an injury history, but I think he is an all defense type guy. I know some of the metrics haven't been the best over the last couple of years, but he's been in a very dysfunctional situation. Yeah. Then I think it kind of comes down to price, where I'm with you. If it doesn't, assuming it doesn't cost a first, or I don't think the Lakers would give up a first for Derrick Jones, he might be second just in terms of like fit and price. But I would have easily said Wiggins over Brooks going into the season, and maybe even like early in the season. But with how Brooks is playing right now, it's not. It is the intensity, the defense, like just the mentality that he brings to the game. But offensively, he's also been shooting the ball well and been a really, like, he's been the best contributor of these four offensively as well. So I would take any of them to be honest on the Lakers as that fifth guy, or maybe with Derrick Jones coming off the bench in like a big role. But we got a few I posed to the audience going into this conversation, if anybody had any questions for you. We got over 30 questions, so I had to cut it down to a few here, but we also got a few super chats. So we'll go through a few of these in the super chats, and then we will get you out of here. In terms of And this is an interesting one from Shazaho. What's your guys' idea on beating this deep drop that the Suns and Spurs have used against the Lakers? I think they did okay against the Spurs, just didn't run enough pick and roll with Luka and DA. Also, what is Istok's perfect realistic trade target? So it sounds like you were leaning Herb, but more so the Suns and Spurs drop and like that style of defense. What do you think is the best way to counter that? And we didn't mention, we didn't even get into it, that the Lakers are playing the Suns on Sunday, so they get that rematch and look, a week and a half later. So I guess kind of going into that game, what would be your preference in terms of how to attack that, how to counter that?
Yeah. So I think there are two parts to it. One part is, okay, just scheme wise, X and O wise, and I won't go into too much into that. I think part of the Lakers Twitter is very much into it, and I think they have room for improvement to be more creative, to run more actions specifically designed to be that. But even in that game, in the Spurs game, I checked it back, and if you look at cleaning the glass breakdown, I think the Lakers were like 10 points per 100 better in half court than the Spurs. So if you remember, they started the game scoring like on first 8-9 possessions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we see in the past, especially with Luka, is when he's scoring at a high rate. So I think in this game it was, if not for these turnovers and if not for some of the missed shots that resulted in Spurs basically fast break on the other end. And we also need to take into account that both the Spurs and the Suns, I think both shot like 45% from free or four. I think at the end maybe it wasn't as drastic for the Spurs, but I think in the first half they would like start at 14 from 25 or something like that, like crazy high number. So that all compounded. What I'm trying to get, I think when Luka especially hits, let's say, additional step back or additional mid-range jumper, it's very, I think the momentum in this game, and we've seen in the past when the teams go away from this scheme that now looks like very successful. When you hit that point and you go to more hedging, blitzing, it was not that far away in the Spurs game. And then we would have all of different discussion. They would play 4-on-3 again, and we know how good they are in this. So I think the best solution, it's the most obvious in this case, is just Luka or Austin dominating with scoring, because once you start scoring against drop and it's when you start making these mid-range jumpers, I think it gets a little bit demoralizing. So this is one thing I think as this team is currently built, because as you said, you don't run, you don't crash the glass. It's basically just requires the right level of scoring. I think they could use Ayton more. I think Ayton was in this game, if you remember, I think against the Spurs he hit like his first 3 jumpers in the first quarter. So I think they a little bit got away from that. So maybe something this is something that could be there. But also one other thing I think that they did, and this is maybe that JJ can lose LeBron more or Luka more. Just change when you see that, I don't know, Luka is not hitting the pocket shots at 60% rate, or Austin is not hitting. Put LeBron or Luka in the post. We saw this. They change geometry of the court. And we saw this with Luka in the playoffs. Sometimes they would be just like a hammer. I say the solution, you try the same hammer on the same nail all the time, stack pick and roll after stack pick and roll to track the drop. And if it doesn't work, I think the opposing team just gets confidence. Once you start, I call this attacking from different angles on the court. I think the schemes are much more difficult, especially in the regular season, because they typically would prepare for this main Luka pick and roll, main Austin pick and roll, and they wouldn't have the scheme as developed as attacking from other angles. So I think using these two guys, LeBron and Luka in the post, and try from there, play from there, a little bit more LeBron, Luka, 2 main actions going against, I think they could be way more aggressive at attacking Fox on the other end with LeBron and Luka, because they are so much bigger getting to the line. So I think just maybe adjust quicker when the main attack is not working.
I like that, especially if part of teams playing them 2v2 is trying to stay out of rotation, stay out of the blender, stay out of the 4-on-3, 3-on-2 situations. And then if you can attack certain mismatches or get them in the post and get them with that advantage, it's either they're scoring or getting fouled, or you start to double that, and that is what triggers then the 4-on-3, 3-on-2 situation.
It's much more difficult to not send a double in the post against Luka or LeBron. You kind of have to.
You have to, and then that's what the defense does not want to do. So that is like, obviously you're trying. That's the cat and mouse game. That's the chess match between the offense and the defense. So I agree. I think that's the best way to approach it. I think, and also like maybe some. I would still like to see more Luka LeBron 2-man game. And again, it really depends on the type of defense you're facing, the defenders that you're facing. Are they like size? Can they easily switch that? Or is it going to be a mismatch in one direction, right? Like we've seen more so last season, but go back to last season, sometimes teams would put centers on LeBron, or like against OKC, that there were stretches where they were putting Hartenstein on LeBron, or Clippers would put Zubats on LeBron. And if that's the case, then you bring that guy into the mix. Or if it's just kind of a slower player that can't reasonably hang with Luka in a ISO situation, you want to bring that player in. And then obviously if it's a smaller player on Luka, if it's a Nemhard or a Fox or someone like that, you want to get that player switched onto LeBron.
Have Gillespie in the Suns game, for example, or Booker if he will play. I don't know. We'll see.
Similar to what they did against Philly down the stretch of just kind of spamming those mismatches. But yeah, I mean, the ball controls, like with the Suns matchup in particular, it's going to be ball control. They need to be under 15 turnovers, ideally somewhere in that like 11 to 13 range, I think is a sweet spot. They need to get back in transition, even after makes, but especially after the turnovers, especially after misses, they need to get back in transition. And I would like to see some of the urgency and effort defensively in terms of communication, off-ball coverages, physicality that they had in that second half against Philly, that like they had in a couple stretches against San Antonio. And you wrote about this, and I've talked about it on my show, that like they have these 4 to 5 minute stretches of really, really elite defense or good defense for them, that it's just sort of like, I know it's tough. I know there's like there's a stamina component to it. And like, I'm not saying it's easy to do that for 48 minutes, but they will have like 8 to 10 minutes of a game where they're awesome defensively. And I would like them to start stretching that into 15 minutes a game and 20 minutes a game and 25 minutes a game. And again, there's a limitation here just with the personnel. They're never going to be an elite defense. I don't even think they're going to be a top 10 defense, but they do show you sometimes like, oh yeah, we could try for like a few minutes here. And when they do that, it can be a little frustrating, because you're like, why aren't you starting games like this? Why aren't you starting halves like this? Like, why aren't you do that more consistently?
This is where the smart part comes in, because early in the season, before he missed these 6 games, I think one of the things that Lakers defense did well, and this is not only Smart, also Jake, I think, they did create turnovers. They were hanging on around top 10. They were even at 7th, 8th place in forcing turnovers. And when Smart missed time, this just went completely down. So I think Smart is a guy who's historically increases the opponent turnover rate for every team that he was on. Jake, to a little bit lesser extent, Wando as well. But I think this is something that this defense needs, because, like you said, they're not going to defend the drive. They're not going to be like schematically and sound one-on-one. So they need to somehow, I was telling the defense, just be good enough so that the offense on the other end can take care of the business.
Next one from Slothanova. What is Iztok's reaction to people saying Luka is too ball dominant in first quarters?
Yeah, this is a good question, and basically we see it. We've seen it in the past, also in Dallas or even on Slovenia national team. It was the same, so it's not like a Lakers specific thing. Yeah, so it's more like Luka specific thing. I think it's obvious right now that it's the way he likes to start games, the ways he likes to play games. Sometimes it can be challenging, like other guys getting touches, or you could say maybe he should get other getting involved or things like that. But we saw, for example, in Dallas, I think we saw it also this year in Luka Austin dynamics. For example, in Dallas, this was worked extremely well with Kyrie, right? Because Luka would be the guy who would be like, I would say, what he's very good at, especially when he's on his game, is he creates so much pressure on the opponent defenses from the first possession. You basically don't get the break off. Maybe they run a set play, like first two guys, one play for LeBron or maybe something, but then it's like a Luka pick and roll after, I don't know, second, third possession, and they check the coverages. And when he's on his game, it's like basically the whole defensive plans of the defensive plan of opposing team revolves around that. He gets defenders in foul trouble. They need to change schemes when the game is on. And then what we would see, for example, in Dallas is basically, and Kyrie was great at that, he would just go off in fourth quarter because they just weren't ready for him, because it took so much mental focus and effort on the opposing guys. So this is where I say this approach works, but I think especially with the Lakers, because their biggest strength is they have these three guys. So I think finding at times, especially when it doesn't work, and this goes back to before when we say, okay, what should we do against this scheme? Maybe let's go quicker to LeBron in the post. Maybe, I don't know, let's try some off-ball action for Austin. Maybe this is something that it's the next step for JJ to convince Luka, look, when you're on your game, let's go with this plan. It's great. It's what makes you awesome. But sometimes when we get stuck, let's maybe try an alternative plan.
Yeah, I'm fully in agreement with you. I think the Clippers game was probably the best representation of this, where Luka goes off, I believe had 24 in that first quarter. And then you start to see they were throwing the kitchen sink at Luka, and they started blitzing and hedging at half court, and like they're guarding him all the way up there, and they're just trying everything to slow him down. And all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, remember they have LeBron out there, they have Austin Reeves out there, and those guys start to hit you. Like, it kind of reminds me of almost like a boxing. Like boxers have different approaches.
Yeah,
and if Luka was a boxer, Luka is, I'm going to come out of the gate strong, and I'm going to attack you with haymakers and a bunch of body shots, and like, I'm going to set the tone early, and I'm going to get you on your heels, and now you're going to have to counter and adjust to the way that I'm starting this. And that's how he starts games. He gets off to the big start, 12 points, 15 points, 18 points, 20 points, and then all of a sudden, whatever the team's initial game plan was, they're getting a little nervous because it's like, hey, we wanted to do this against Luka. He just cooked this. And now we have to counter, and now we have to start trapping and blitzing.
You're a little bit back to your starting five argument. Mm-hmm. I think what Lakers lacked, and I think this happened in the Phoenix game. I think Luka was on similar scoring run. I think he had 20 points in the first quarter. He was like making all kinds of shots. But I think the Lakers weren't even up, or it was even after the first quarter. So I think in games when Luka is starting like that, I don't think you need a lot more offense on the floor. So I think what Lakers missed.
That's a really good point.
This time, I think they need like defense to get stops. So when he has 20 points in the first quarter, you should be out by 10. You shouldn't be down by 2. You shouldn't be, I don't know, tied. So I think this is something that goes a little bit to the mentality of this starting group when they ease into the game. So even when Luka is not easing in on offense, but he has like 20 this scoring outburst, they start a little bit too soft, too nonchalant, and they don't build leads. So I think this is something that probably in games, if you would start more, let's say a couple of more or one more defender, and then if Luka has a great start, you build on that, you have a lead, maybe you defend it better. But if you don't, then you put, I don't know, more offense in. So you can always adjust.
I think to that, like, there's... again, I referenced the Clippers game because this was a game that I thought LeBron and Austin were still able to get into a really high level rhythm in that game, because I think part of it is like it is a war of attrition thing where, again, like Luka starts the game a certain way, then you either let him drop 60, 70 on you, or realistically you counter and then he starts to distribute. And that's where Rui gets his threes, Jake gets his threes, Gabe gets his threes, etc. Ayton gets his lobs and his dump offs. Jackson gets his lobs. I think the two guys here that it's going to be interesting to monitor are obviously LeBron and Austin, because those guys are used to having the ball and being in a certain rhythm. And I think those are the two guys where it's a little bit trickier in terms of just like, unless you're shifting them entirely off the ball, which I don't think the Lakers are going to do, and I don't think they should do. Those guys I think can be a little bit more affected by that style, right? So I think the role players can thrive in that style, and we've seen the role players thrive in like the shot quality and all that stuff. It's the other two guys that do need the ball to some extent, that like they're often going one quarter without really touching it that much, and then it starts to be okay, starting at the second quarter, now we're going to spam the LeBron Austin stuff, and like it does feel like, I think that's like the missing piece for them to figure out. And that actually leads me to the next question of this one is from Bahamut on Discord. How do we handle our big three being a net negative together? What are our options? So for reference here, the Lakers' big three right now has a -5 net rating together. It has improved a lot. It was in the double-digit negatives. But then again, that kind of factors into the starting group, where those starting minutes, they are a -13 and they're getting killed right now. So what do you think, factoring in like what Austin and LeBron need? And I think the Clippers game is an example. I think the Philly game is an example where they were running some 3-man actions with those three. And I thought LeBron as a screener really unlocked Austin after his slow start. And then, of course, like Luka and down the stretch. But what do you think of like, how can they start to win those minutes? Is it, if you start smart, play some more defenders and athletes around them, it'll just start to kind of shift in that direction? Or is it just kind of LeBron's still working his way back in? The shooting hasn't quite been there for him outside of the Philly game. Austin has had to adjust a bit to LeBron returning. He's kind of hit a wall right now with his conditioning, his legs. Is it kind of more like that context, or do you think there is something more drastic in terms of like the lineup construction that they have to tweak to start winning these minutes?
I think they're like micro and macro look at this. I think the macro look at this, it's going back. I think it's just going to be hard to build, like I said, a team. And now we are talking about contender level team at around two players as specific as Luka and LeBron at this stage in his career. So this is something. But I think in the micro moment they can still adjust a lot of the things. A lot of the negative comes from the starting five, because they start the game so slow, and they just compound the issues that they currently have, which is a lot of its transition defense, defense in general. So part of it is because of LeBron, let's say, slower start after sciatica, which is logical. Basically based on his age and how difficult that of an injury it is. So I think just balancing these lineups, and it goes back to the title and how they can overcome the speed and athleticism. I think they need in these lineups, especially with Luka and LeBron, they need faster players to fix their transition defense, to fix some of the balance on the floor. So I think that would solve it for sure. And as LeBron gets better, gets more rhythm back, I think we saw glimpses of him getting the dunk, the post
Hell of a dunk.
Yes,
Hell of a dunk.
the two transition blocks. So there were kind of signs of he's getting there. And I think as he's getting there, I think we can maybe go back to what we saw last year at the end of regular season. If you remember, I think there were some games where they were really good down the stretch in these three-man actions. I remember the Memphis game. I remember one of the Houston games when they were just searching for the weakest link in Memphis game. That was Ja. In Houston, it was Van Fleet. So I think even Indiana game was a game like that. So once I think LeBron gets fully into his game, I think on the other end, I think they can really try to manipulate matchups again and use that to their advantage.
All right, now let's get into some of the super chats, and then we will get out of here. First one from Musel K 420. Hey, Jovan, I don't know if you remember, I told you if LA can trade AR for Castle and picks, that's a great trade for LA. Nothing against AR. It's a hard fit with the King and Luka. I don't think San Antonio would trade Castle.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could certainly make that case that Castle is a better fit next to Luka because of the two-way ability. I think the shot is still coming along, although it looked pretty good against the Lakers. But yeah, I think, based on, he was rookie of the year, based on his contract situation, how young he is, I don't think San Antonio would, I don't think they're going to trade him for Giannis, let alone for Austin. So yeah, I think it is an interesting, just hypothetical here. If you could swap those two, what that would look like for both sides.
Goes, I think it goes to the archetype. It goes to the archetype. I think if there is a guard or if there is a player that you would eventually swap Austin for, it's like that Drew Holiday type of a guard, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's a guy who I never seen in Luka's career play against, because he always played against next to Jalen Brunson, Kyrie Irving, now Austin. So it's Spencer Dinwiddie. So it was always this other ball handler who had their problems or limitations defensively. So if there is a archetype that you could try to see if that works better, as I said, it's that Drew Holiday. I mentioned in the offseason, the guy that I see similar is the guy in Orlando, like Jalen Suggs, because defensively he can be that guy, but offensively I don't think he's there, and he has such a huge injury risk, I think, so far in his career. And Austin, to be fair, has played at the level that I don't think I would do that trade now. But I think the archetype, and Castle gets into that same, let's say, archetype. And to Castle, that's why he was the second pick. He also has the athleticism, which again solves you with the pace, with a lot of other things.
Next one from Appetizers and Sushi. Deja vu of round one. JJ is stubborn and will burn his starters into the ground when he has decent options off of the bench. I thought he had learned his lesson. My slight pushback here would just be, the bench has been very inconsistent, and so I think I think in general, and I'm curious to get your perspective on this, I think they are leaning a little bit too much on Luka and Austin from a minutes perspective. The fact that those two guys are top three in minutes right now, yes, LeBron was out, so they needed to adjust that. But I thought when LeBron would come back, that would drop a little bit. And it really hasn't. Those guys are still playing in the high 30s, sometimes even 40 minutes in regulation, because the Lakers haven't even played an overtime game yet. That is my one issue more so with the rotation right now, of you should be able to play Luka 34, 35, maybe 36 minutes tops against some of these teams and beat them. JJ clearly does not feel that way. He's we need to play Luka 38 to 40 minutes every single night. Similar with Austin. That's been my bigger thing of you look at yesterday for my contenders rankings, I was going through each team and their rotation, and so many teams are playing their best players low to maybe mid 30s and still winning games and winning games more than the Lakers. And this gets back to the starters and some of the roster deficiencies and whatnot. But I would like to see their minutes come down a little bit by 2, 3, 4 minutes a game. Outside of that, though, we could argue maybe Adou or Vando should be playing more. I think that's actually more swapping them in for one of the bench guys rather than just adding another player into the rotation. But Jake and Gabe, and I think Jackson's been largely solid in his role, but there's not been a lot to be encouraged by from the bench. And especially when Marcus is out, there's a lot of inconsistency there. So I think he could trust them more. I'm not disagreeing with that. I don't think this isn't with Darvin Ham when he was bringing Austin off the bench, and it was why is he benching this guy that should clearly be starting and playing mid 30s minutes? It's no, they kind of have guys who are bench guys, and probably should be under 20 minutes a night.
Yeah, I think Luka's minutes has always been a discussion. As I said, always the same discussion in Dallas, even on the national team. Why are his minutes so high? So I think partially it's not only JJ, partially is his thing. So I think he wants to play high minutes. But on the other hand, I think there shouldn't be similar argument with Austin or even LeBron, to be honest. Why? I don't know what is LeBron now, but I think he's around 33, 32, 33 for sure. So again, this is something, I don't know if it's a JJ thing, if it's a locker room thing, but I agree that they should do. And I think it goes back to how hard you play, because the trend is there, although Ja Morant didn't like it in Memphis when they were trying to explain the really extreme Thomas Isalo way look at it. But what Isalo was talking about is the trend is in shorter stints but playing harder all the time. I think the challenge currently of the NBA is that it is adapting, that there is more and more teams. There are some really bad teams which Lakers beat easily, but there are more teams that play like hard all the time, 82 games per season. And that is, I think, way more than it was just a couple of seasons or even a season ago. So that's where this approach comes problematic. And that's when you see Lakers struggle when they don't dominate with the offense, is because they don't have the legs or they don't have the bodies, the athleticism to adapt to this new style.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. So minutes per game leaders, Maxi's at 40 minutes a game, which is a throwback to like the 90s and early 2000s. Then Luka's at number 2, 37.2. Austin's at number 3, 36.9. So basically 37. Then you have a pretty big drop off to 36.4 at Cade, 36.2 Amen Thompson, 35.9 Şengün. So like Houston is playing their guys high, but those guys are also both in their early 20s. Austin and Luka are now, approaching their, mid to late 20s, and just carrying such a high offensive load that it's just, I don't know. I would like to see it a little bit lower. I'd like to see 35. What would be my preference, right? 30, maybe 36. But it sounds a little insane at like a minute difference, but that does add up. And also, this is the average, right? Because there are plenty of games where they're playing 39, 40, 41, and it's a little bit higher. But next one from Muzo K420. Again, thank you for the super chat. Trade AR now. His value is up right now, 40 million. No way. So I've been on record stating that I think if you are going to move off of Austin, the smart time would be either in the offseason in a sign and trade, or just re-signing him and then next season flipping him on the new salary. Trading for him now, you're not getting equal value to him based on his contract. He's making $14 million outside of like the Castle, Cooper Flag, stud, like rookie first few year guys. No one making that range is close to as good as Austin. Like he's in that 30 plus million, 35 plus million class in terms of like player. So you're not getting back equal value, and you're doubly not getting back equal value because Austin is a flight risk, and any team that trades for him, he's about to opt out regardless of whether it's with the Lakers or with a new team. And he has loyalty to the Lakers, but he's not going to have loyalty to any new team that trades for him. Like they'll have his bird rights, so they can't offer him more, and that could be a factor. But I think if Austin gets traded, he's going to explore his options and test free agency and go to the best situation. So you could be trading from the Lakers side. I think you're actually selling low on him. You're not selling high, and you're also not maximizing him as an asset. And then the other team is probably not going to want to give up as much because of him potentially leaving. So I vehemently disagree with this. I think you need to get Austin. Like part of the reason why the Grizzlies got 4 picks for Bane was because of his contract and because of the number it was at, and you had multiple years left. Same thing with Austin. You need to get him on a bigger contract, because the disaster scenario for one of these teams would be like, all right, let's trade for Austin. Then he leaves. And then what are you telling your fan base when you gave up maybe multiple picks or like a young blue chip stud or whatever, and now Austin leaves in free agency, it's like that would be a complete disaster for any team trading for him. So I don't see the Lakers trading him until potentially in the future, as in like past this season. But I also think it would be a mistake to do it this season.
Yeah, I don't think I agree. I don't think I just don't see team trading for Austin, to be honest, or Lakers taking the package they expect, getting the package in return because of the things you said, because of the contract and because of his situation. So I don't think it's realistic that this will happen this season. What will be interesting, taking this into account, is if they make a trade deadline move or if they resign him, hopefully, and then what kind of moves do they make? Do they see him as a future building block? This is, I think, to me, much more intriguing, is how the moves, do they make them to complement Luka and Austin?
Then next one from Pinty23. Thank you for super chat. Adou has not tried a 3 yet. Try. What's your thought on like the kind of the balance between trying to keep the defense honest versus like, because I think there's a gap here where like Marcus can have the night he had, and again, I think it's once in a blue moon. It's not going to happen frequently, but I don't think Adou or Vando is having, if they're getting the same shots that Marcus got, I don't think they're making 8 of them. I just don't. I think there is a gap there between those two shooters and Marcus. But like, what do you think of the balance between trying to make a team pay for ignoring you, but also having like a realistic view of anytime Adou or Vando is shooting a 3, it probably is a win for the defense?
I think we are not even there yet with Adou. With Vando, we are, because he's on the scouting report. He's the same as Marcus. Let him shoot, or as soon as he comes in, we will defend him with a big. This is what we see in every game with Marcus and Vando. Even Vando, when we said against Philly, first minute he got in because Jake got hit in the face, they put Embiid on him immediately. I think Adou is not on the scouting report yet. To that extent, he will be probably after a couple of games. But I haven't even seen him in these short stints, like to be in the situation when he would be passing up shots. I don't think it's there, but I think if he will get extended minutes, he will be. But I think the good thing, like I said, for him with his athleticism is that you can still compensate for some of these things with cutting, like we said, so with athleticism. You can go downhill. You mentioned there was one possession, this stampede drive, when it was like a gap help of him and he got to the rim, he missed, but I think it was a possession that you like because he's so fast. Sometimes you cannot do the same thing that you do against Marcus or Vando, potentially against an athlete like Adou, because if you get him and he gets downhill, it could be too late. He's a rookie, so he's not a great finisher at the rim yet, or he doesn't know he wants to dunk everything. So there will be some frustrations there, but I think these are the reps, again, that you want to take him and you want him to learn, because in the future, this is something that if he pops up, I think he's the Lakers' biggest wild card on this roster for the future.
It's a great point. I don't think they should be worried about him shooting it. I think it's finding, similar to the challenge with Vando of trying to navigate that and figure out the optimal way to use him. I think it's figuring out the optimal way to use Adou, which right now, if anything, if he hits a 3 or he's taking threes, that's kind of gravy to an extent, but it is more so, can he be a second side dribble handoff guy? Can he be crashing the offensive glass and winning some of those margins for the Lakers? Can he be cutting into space? Can he be the Derrick Jones Jr. cutting alongside the baseline, getting the lob and dunking it? Like, that's the way I think to play into him more. A couple more here. This one from Ab Diaz says, they don't use Rui Hachimura enough. He should have 10 shots minimum. He's offensively wasted. So one thing I've said with Rui is, like, he feels like, to me, the bellwether for the Lakers offense, or the it's one of the biomarkers for like the health of the offense, in terms of if Rui's getting, I mean, some of these games recently he's had 4 shots, 2 shots, 1 shot. If he's not getting a lot of shots, I don't put that on Rui. I put that on the way, like, just the overall ball movement, the health of the offense, the way that teams are zeroing in that deep drop and forcing it into more ISO situations. But when Rui's getting 8, 10, 12 shots, that's typically the ball snapping. They're breaking down the defense. They're getting into those 4-on-3, 3-on-2s, and that's how Rui will eat, whether it is directly in a catch and shoot situation, or maybe it is, attack the closeout, hit that little pull up midi that he's so good at. So, I mean, do you agree with that? Is there like a target number you'd want for him? Or like, how do you view Rui's role within the offense and like what that kind of says about the offense when he's not getting as many shots?
Yeah, like I said, I think the role player shot depends a lot about on how teams defend Luka, how they defend Austin. So if it's more of a 2-on-2, you will see Luka shots up. If it's more like 4-on-3 playing out of doubles, out of hedges, you will see a lot of more shots for these guys. One thing, and maybe again going back to to be honest, I don't see this changing more. I think his shots will fluctuate based on how the defenses play them. But maybe one thing that we saw last year in the playoffs when they play small ball, and there was Dorian with him, so he was not like a Marcus type of a shooter. He was the guy that basically was the most used, has like the highest usage as a screener in Luka pick and roll against Rudy, because they would, and he's a good pick and pop shooter. So I think if they find like a lineup, they play more small. I don't know, with Jake maybe you get some of the, instead of some of the Rui minutes in the starting 5, you get them some in the bench, let's say middle of the game, small ball units, and you utilize him as a screener. With Luka, with Austin, I think he can get more usage and more shots than in starting 5. So I think this is, again, maybe a way that they can be creative a little bit.
And final one from Musel K420 again. Thank you for the super chat. Expirings plus first round pick plus AR for Herb Jones and Trey Murphy. So he really wants to trade Austin, which I know a lot of people are feeling right now, especially coming off the last couple games he's had. But what do you think of this? Even putting the expirings and the first round pick to the side, like this has been a trade proposal that people have been interested in throughout the season. Like, I would rather straight up have Austin, obviously, than Herb or Trey. I think he's a much better player than both of them, and there's a gap there. But I also argued a couple streams ago that whatever gap there might be between Austin and Trey, I think Herb Jones slides into that gap, and it is like an interesting tandem next to Luka. The one thing I will note, though, which I noted at that time as well, was that I think Luka does like having that secondary ball handler and playmaker next to him, and we have seen the success with Brunson, with Kyrie, with Austin. And if you are reshaping your starting group and your core to be something like, let's just say this trade happens, it would be Luka, Herb, Trey, LeBron, Ayton. Okay, for this season, you have LeBron. And for even, potentially next season, depending on what happens with LeBron, you have LeBron as that second guy, and you could lean on him more than you currently are. But longer term, if you are locking yourself into a 1 through 3 trio of Luka, Herb, and Trey, I think you're really going to need to have to find that secondary playmaker at the 4 or 5 spot, which is a unique player. That's a unique build. Like, we are seeing from a skill perspective, the center position change, and there are as many good to great center passers in the league as there have ever been. But still, like, I don't think, my point is just essentially, I don't think Trey Murphy is the ball handler, playmaker, passer that Brunson, Kyrie, Austin is. So if you're not getting it from that 2 or 3 spot, you now have to get it from the 4 or 5 spot. Otherwise, I don't think that's an optimal build around Luka. I don't think that's how Luka wants to play. And I just think like that, we have a proven, we have proven markers of what has worked around Luka. And one of them is that secondary score. Like, I think Murphy could maybe be the scorer, but he's not the ball handler, playmaker that can run the offense when Luka's off the floor. So that's where I think that skill set is very valuable around Luka. And I think flipping Austin, you need to go find that elsewhere. And it probably now has to be a big man, which, like, the list of big men that could do that is a very narrow list. And then when you factor in, like, you don't want them to be bad defensively, that's an even narrower list of, like, minus defender who's also a really good passer. it's a small Venn diagram there.
Yeah, to me, first of all, again, this is total hypothetical because I don't think New Orleans is trading for Austin because he will not resign there. But I think it's a good hypothetical, and I love both those players. I love Trey because he's not only a shooter, but he's an athlete. So he's an athlete. He's one of the best guys at finishing lobs in transition. He's fast. He's long. So hypothetically, if you have them now being your 3 and 4, that would be great. But I agree with you. If you're trading Austin, I think you need to get back a similar, let's say, a wing playmaker. If it's not an elite guy or secondary, I would say high usage scorer. Somebody like ideally, let's say ideal fit to me would be like Jaylen Brown, but that's not going to happen because I think Jaylen Brown is too good and Boston is not doing that. But let's say some other players in that mold, a player like Danny Audia or a player like Franz Wagner. So basically they are like wings, but who proved that they could be like this secondary creator, secondary offense generators, much more than a guy like Trey Murphy, in my opinion. So that to me are more the discussions that I would evaluate those kind of players when you say, okay, we are getting a second guy, maybe he's not on-ball guy, and then you need a backup point guard to help these guys out in non-Luka minutes, but you're getting a bigger wing player who can help you in other departments, who can help you in defense, who can help you with length, with size, with rebounding, and is less of defensive, let's say, target to attack. So that are maybe the directions that I would rather look into in the future.
That's fair. Well, Iztok, thank you for your time. I appreciate you hopping on here. And it's 10:30 over there?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you spending your Friday night with us. Late Night Gang is global. we are international. We are everywhere.
True.
I appreciate you. But anything you want to plug before we get out of here, I will put your social handle in the show notes, and then also link to Diggin' Basketball, which again, on Substack, I recommend everybody subscribe. If you enjoyed this interview, if you like his analysis, he has game previews, also is doing the 20 game check-ins, also doing the post-game analysis, which 5 takeaways, very high level, breaking it down with film, with numbers, with charts, all that stuff. Great stuff. I'm a subscriber and I really enjoy it and always learn something from reading you. So anything else you want to plug before we go?
No, I think you summed it up very well. So thank you. Thanks for the invite. Always enjoyed talking basketball with you. Like you said, Late Night Gang, a lot of with Luka, a lot of international fans coming on board. So a lot of crazy hours. So I think that's a fun. I think I love also on Twitter. I love engaging with different people. I met so many interesting people, and just talking basketball is always a pleasure, always fun.
Again, give Iztok a follow and check out Diggin' Basketball. We have one final one here from Uzok, 420. King this year for ball handling, plus second, and Dalton for AO or Ellis. So I think he's saying this is a follow-up to Herb and Trey of get your ball handling from doing a second trade to get IO or Ellis. I still think the player needs to be a higher level player, but maybe that works. Maybe you don't need that second. But I think Brunson, Kyrie, and Austin have all basically been like all-star level. Like Brunson was ascending at that time, right? And really ascended in the playoffs. Kyrie's Kyrie. Austin has ascended to all-star level now.
I think the closest player, closest lower level player that had some success, although it was like a third ball handler, it was Spencer Dinwiddie, who had some success in that role. But like I said, not in the playoffs. It was mostly Brunson and Luka. So I think you need something. I think Austin has been so good. Man is averaging, I don't know, 28 points or 29. So I don't think you give up that. And I think it's too valuable. I think, like I said, I would do it for either really different making defensive big, or a wing who is like a great scorer, like I mentioned, but not for anything else, would be a big step down.
Awesome. Well, we got to all the super chats. Appreciate you all for tuning in. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. Let's get those subscribes up. If you're watching an hour and a half in and you're not yet subscribed, please consider doing so. And let's also get those likes up for those who are tuned in and have not yet liked. And then for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back Sunday evening after Lakers Suns. Unfortunately, will not be doing playback. I probably would have been doing a playback if it still existed. So that went away. And then also I will be on CNN tonight to talk some Lakers. So going to be late West Coast time, around 10 p.m. Pacific time. But for those who have CNN, check it out. Be on there talking about some of the stuff we talked about on the show. But Iztok, thank you again. Appreciate the time. And enjoy your Friday evening. For everyone else, enjoy your Friday afternoon and evening. Appreciate the late night gang. Shout out to the chat, and talk to you all soon.